Let's get started. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining onto our webinar. We will keep it nice and short and sweet for you today. I'm sure everybody wants to get onto their lunch break or get on with their sort of busy days before the bank holiday weekend. So yeah, we'll get this kicked off for you. So welcome. Today's presentation is going to be discussing how modern cybercrime actually works. So we're going to be looking inside the kind of minds and methods of modern cyber criminals. So as I said, we're not going to take up too much of your time. So it's going to be just about sort of half an hour or so, maybe a bit less today. And just before we get started, we are going to be recording this session. So feel free to turn your camera off if you don't want to be shown, but we'll obviously be sending this session around at the end. So if there's anything that you miss or you want to look at any of the slides, they'll be available for you after the session. If you want to ask myself or anybody else on the webinar any questions, you can do so. Feel free to drop a little question in the chat box. We'll probably wait till the end and come around to them just for ease, but feel free to drop anything in as you go, as you think of it, and we'll take those on at the end. Cool. So let's get started. So welcome. My name is Beth. I'm product manager here at On Security. I am joined on the call today by Liv, who's going to be helping out with any questions as we go. And we've also got Callum, who's our head of security engineering, who's going to be taking us through some of the demonstrations of the little sort of technical bits that we're going to be showing a little bit later on. So why are we here? Good question, I know. So this whole story basically started when we were contacted by one of our clients who was a small building engineering services firm based in Bristol. They had about 4 million annual turnover. And then they rang us one day just to say that they'd become the victim of a ransomware attack. So for a Fortune 500 company, you'd probably expect to be targeted by cyber criminals. You've got very high revenues or maybe lots of juicy data that they'd like. But we wanted to know, how does a seemingly sort of random building company go from being everything is fine to saying suddenly this ransomware group wants 250 grand from us? So to answer this, we decided to set our security engineering team on a long-term project to work out how this industry actually works. And we found out that it's actually the opposite to how many people think. And the purpose of the webinar basically is just to help you understand how modern cybercrime actually works, and then how you can kind of go about protecting your business in a meaningful way based off this kind of new knowledge that you're going to have. So first off, we're going to be discussing how cybercrime works today. So then we're going to be moving on to how you can be targeted, how you're targeted, and then lastly we're going to be looking at how you can kind of use this information to avoid being the victim of a successful attack. So first off, let's have a look at the sophistication of today's cyber criminal industry. So I'm going to introduce the concept of the compromise funnel here, if you haven't heard of this before. So the cybercrime industry is actually pretty sophisticated today. So this is an advert, if you can see it, from a group of ransomware developers. So they're offering ransomware as a service. So this is on like a subscription basis. It's pretty similar to a legit ad for anything else, really. So you've got multiple tiers. There's different price ranges, support packages, even like forums and stuff. So this model makes it much easier for anybody with an internet connection to generate ransom. It's in exactly the same way that SaaS helps organizations scale. So this sort of stuff maybe isn't news to you, but what you might not know is how the kind of industry actually operates around this sort of thing. So we looked at, and there's actually 290 million businesses in the world. So and even 6.5 million of those based in the UK. So basically your business is going to be a needle in a haystack, but we are still seeing that businesses are being compromised every single day. So again, we're asking the question, how on earth did our small building engineering services company go from being 1 in 290 million to becoming the victim of a successful hack? So this is the sales funnel. As we went, we found that we were able to kind of start drawing some comparisons. So this is how the sales process basically works in the kind of SaaS industry. So at each level of funnel, you'll find there's different organizations. They've all got kind of different goals and specialisms. Then they provide services to each other. And it's basically exactly the same with the cybercrime industry. So the only difference is that instead of your kind of sales leads, you've got leads for potential targets for cybercrime. But with cybercrime, this is where the term the compromise funnel comes in. So it's the same sort of thing. But the first stage starts off with target generation. So what's happening here? So we've got things like mass phishing attacks, credential leaks, credential spraying, brute forcing, anything basically that's kind of indiscriminate, but is where different groups are working with different attack vectors and different sort of methods, and they're casting a wide net to try and get a lot of targets. So then the next stage down is target validation. So this is where they're attempting to validate breach credentials against other services, and then they're exploiting vulnerabilities to see if they can get access to a system through those vulnerabilities or those breach credentials. Next, they get to the selection stage. So this is where the leads from the previous stage are checked against the specific selection criteria. And then the next stage down, which is the ROI stage. So this is where groups actually get the return on their investment. So that's through a compromise, maybe. So by executing ransomware, stealing data, or even sort of generating more leads to start the whole process again. So we thought, let's have a quick look at some of these stages in action, kind of in the real world. So these are kind of a group of some screenshots of some ads that we found on the dark web. So they might be a little bit small, but so as I said, we'll send the slides around afterwards. So if you want to have a bit more of a look at these, you can do. But I'll give an overview of kind of what is in each of them. So these group of screenshots, this has a list of where sometimes leads are being sold that are really, really similar to kind of sales leads. So these are helping to map tech stacks. So one of these screenshots, they're selling Office 365 users. So this is where another actor might target these using some credentials from a different source, or they could use it in a kind of specialized phishing campaign for Office 365. Sometimes you'll see people selling lists of credentials from multiple website compromises. The idea being that people can basically try them on other sites or services, and what they're doing is just relying on the fact that people are really often reusing passwords across different services. So this is an example of kind of the next stage of the funnel in action. So the target validation stage. So this is a list being sold of verified WordPress logins. So that means that they've been tested against WordPress installations and they've been proven to work. So they've been proven to have legitimate sort of access within. Some vendors will sell these lists that they're selling to anyone, to multiple people, but sometimes they want to sell them exclusively. So this guy is just selling them to one person and kind of asking for offers, as in who can kind of give the biggest offer for this list. This one is actually selling access to an entire network. So you can see, I'm not sure, but there's basically a contents page which lists the kind of credentials that are included. It says VPN access, server and host map, network credentials, even bank account tokens, and then it looks like there's also access to another network as well included in that. So pretty comprehensive there. So this one was really interesting. We also found a guy who is selling access to a US Department of Defense network, and basically saying that there was already evidence that has been compromised by a ransomware group, the Endurance ransomware group, and they're selling the access after the fact. So the real thing to actually bear in mind here is it's not actually the people who are kind of running and posting these ads that are the ones that you should really be the most concerned about. It's actually the people that are responding to the ads that you need to be worried about. So these are called affiliates. Affiliates are basically the kind of Uber drivers of the cybercrime economy. So they're like independent contractors, and they work with these revenue generating groups like ransomware groups, and provide services to them, kind of like associates do. So this is an example of kind of this concept in action, really. So this is an ad from the Babook ransomware group, and they're basically looking for affiliate partners here. So ransomware groups quite often do this because they want to spread their ransomware, and using affiliates means that it enables them to kind of distance themselves from the actual compromising themselves, so they don't have to do it themselves, and also that they can just scale the program faster. So how it works is they'll ask for affiliates to bring them compromised targets that meet the target criteria that they set out. So in this ad, it is really small, but basically the kind of only general criteria is that the lead has an annual revenue of 4 million at least. And then they also kind of vaguely list some industries to avoid, like non-profits and schools. But basically that's it. So in reality, the person who chooses your organization as a target and then compromises you is going to be the affiliate. They then pass you on as a compromised target to the ransomware group who will extort you, and then the affiliate then receive a commission back for their efforts in doing that. So basically, you have to meet the target criteria in order to go all the way through the compromise funnel. So a good example of this in action is that in 2021, there was a Microsoft disclosed a 0-day vulnerability in their mail server. So a 0-day is basically when a vulnerability is exploited actively before the software provider is able to release a patch for it. So before it hit the news, only some of the organizations who've been compromised actually saw anything bad, like requests for ransom or data theft, for example. And this was because there's only one group with one set of specific requirements who are actively exploiting the vulnerability at that stage. But obviously, once it got out in the news, the floodgates opened, basically. And it just meant that anybody could use the vulnerability for their own kind of means and agenda. So if you're compromised, basically, there is a chance that you might actually never know if there's only one group doing it in the first place. But it's important that you know, because even if nothing bad happens, it still could in the future. And the reason being that there's obviously more than one group that might be looking at you, all with their own agendas. They've all got their own selection criteria. So you might not hit it for the first group, but you might hit it for a later group. So we want to know how we can get targeted in the first place. To answer this, we need to know how your organization might enter the funnel in the first place. And basically, there's kind of three general ways that this can happen. So first off, it's by being big enough to be chosen as a target. So, think your big name brands, that kind of thing. And this is generally, being chosen as a target is generally how most people think the majority of hacks happen. Secondly is by making a mistake yourself. And then thirdly is actually by being the victim of somebody else's mistake. So good example of a mistake that you could make is leaving services exposed on the internet. So this is a really, really common mistake, and it can bring you onto the top of an attacker's radar and into the compromise funnel really, really quickly. This is because it literally only takes about 5 minutes for an attacker to mass scan every single internet facing IP address. So there's 4.3 billion, and it's less than 5 minutes to find those. There's actually a link here. You can try this out yourself if you want to, when we share the slides around and see how quickly it actually is. But beyond having assets that might be exposed over the internet, what are the other mistakes that you can make? Even if your cybersecurity is perfect, in inverted commas, we know that's never really a true thing, you're likely still vulnerable. So if you're working with a development agency, maybe a partner, or like a SaaS tool, maybe, they can make these mistakes for you. So I'm sure we all know some of the largest hacks recently have been the result of third-party security flaws. So this happens when attackers compromise one organization and then they leverage that to compromise others kind of up their supply chain. So let's just have a quick look more in depth at the top two stages of the funnel. So this was target generation and target verification. So we've just spoken about the mistakes you can make, but how did those actually kind of bring you into the funnel and down? So in the top stage, the generation stage, what's happening here? So we've got large scale, unsophisticated attacks happening constantly. I'm sure we've all seen big generic phishing attempts in your inbox. But whether you're selected to progress onto the next stage generally depends on how the chosen attacker likes to work. So some will go for a single enterprise target for a large payout, but some like to cast a wide net and combine lots of small organizations or even maybe individuals to get the same result. So a good example of this is in 2017, there was a phishing attack targeting something like 30 million Amazon customers. I think they're only asking for something like a $500 ransom at a time, but obviously, if you're targeting 30 million people, this all adds up into quite a big amount if they all pay. Attackers might also use one-day vulnerabilities. So these are recently disclosed vulnerabilities where there is a patch available, but they're relying on people's patch management being really slow. So they haven't quite got round to patching the hole quick enough. Supply chain hacks, as we said, are really common. We've all heard about the SolarWinds hack. So this was where 30,000 organizations were exploited when attackers breached their IT monitoring software, and then they traveled along the supply chain. Mass scanning was also likely the root cause of the Colonial Oil attack. Attackers here found a credential pair to a VPN account, and then they used credential stuffing to access the Colonial network from there. Credential stuffing, if you don't know, is kind of exactly what it sounds like, using username password combinations from other breaches and kind of shoving them into other services. Again, relying on people just reusing passwords across multiple sites. So the main question is, how can this knowledge help us avoid becoming the victim of a successful hack? As we said before, it's incredibly complex to keep even a small business out of the funnel. And a lot of it is out of your control with sort of third-party risk. Everything that touches your company is in there. So if you use LinkedIn, for example, and LinkedIn is breached again, then you're going to be in the funnel again. The problem isn't that you're in it, it's that you don't know you are, and that you don't know how you got there in the first place. So this is the size of the global market research industry. So we wanted to know, why do businesses spend so much on market research, customer feedback, focus groups, and doing like behavior analytics and things like that? So it's obviously to understand how their business looks from the perspective of their company. Oh, sorry, I've gone one slide too forward. It's understanding how their business looks like from the customer's perspective. And if you understand your customers, then you can adapt your strategy and tactics and kind of serve them better. Key thing is you just need to be basically better than most. So it's like not being the easiest house to break into on the street. It's pretty easy to do this, as hardly anybody knows that they're in the funnel before it's too late. But what do most companies spend to work out what their business looks like from the perspective of a hacker? As we said before, the problem is knowing that you're in the funnel in the first place and why you got there, how you get there. Usually the criminal is the first to know and the business is always the last to know. But understanding how your business looks from a hacker's perspective is key, and most people just have no idea. So we're going to now show you some examples of types of situational awareness and how having it can help you ward off some common cyber attacks. So I'm going to hand over to Callum here, and he's going to kind of talk us through some examples that we've got here. Over to you, Cal.
Hi, my camera is off. I apologize for that. I'm in rural Scotland with a terrible internet. Like Beth just said, we're going to talk about situational awareness and how that can be, or what the different kinds are and how that can be beneficial to you as an organization. So situational awareness in terms of cybersecurity can generally be defined about knowledge about what's going on in your immediate and less immediate, like online environment. So you've got assets which are under your control, like your attack surface. What does that look like? What is posted on it? Are there any vulnerabilities with it? Any misconfigurations that can be exploited? But it also involves knowing what attackers are doing. So, you know, what are they scanning for? What are they scanning you? Are they finding anything when they scan you? And also knowing kind of what they've done in the past. So like, have they gone around and breached all these websites which contain some of your employees' credentials? You know, that's important stuff to kind of know to determine what kind of risk you are facing. So we're going to go through two demos just really quick, which they're pre-recorded because it's a bit of a pain. But these things are things that we've chosen because they're good to demonstrate quickly and in real time, whereas other things kind of rely on, like, you know, running a scan that would take 20 minutes or something like that. So the first thing we're going to look at is using certificate transparency feeds to gain situational awareness of assets or newly issued TLS certificates, which are indicative of newly created web services online. So to simplify it, what that means is every time you go to a website and it's got a little padlock up on the top left, that means that site is a TLS cert. So for example, if you go to google.com and it's got that padlock, there's a certificate which verifies that google.com is who it says it is. Now, every time one of those is issued, that data is available for anyone to access in near real time, as all the issuers of these certificates report it to a centralized source. What that means is by monitoring that stream, we can gain real-time insight into when new web applications are being brought online. This can be utilized in a number of ways, but I think first we'll just show you the demo of how it works. So on the right here, we are running the search stream program, which just accesses this stream and retrieves the various domain names for issued certificates. As you can see, there's a lot. It happens very quickly. Even printing out like that ends up being somewhat rate limited. So now we're going to do it again, but we're going to look for the word on security in this stream. And on the left, we've got a server called demo.webinar.org, which we're going to request a new certificate for, because we're spinning up some new thing and we want to prove that we are who we say we are, so we can get the little secure badge in the corner. Now, this is useful not only for finding attackers to find out what new assets have come online and respond to that quickly, but also to allow you to do the same. For example, one of your employees or somewhere else in your organization has set up some new asset that they haven't really told anyone about. A certificate's been issued for it. Now you can know as soon as it happens that these things exist, and you can add it to any kind of asset management stuff, any kind of scanning you've got going on with these assets, or just take whatever action you deem necessary. As you can see there, it's found the demo.webinar.onsecurity thing. So now that's been spun up, that's come out. I know about it. Attackers know about it and can start targeting it. There's been instances where this kind of behavior, or where this certificate transparency stuff, the speed at which you can respond to new things coming online, has been used to compromise certain applications, which tend to ship when you first set them up. They display like a setup page where you need to create the default admin account and things like that. There's been bots which snipe that the second it comes up to take over hosts. Not super common unless you're using those, but it's an idea of how quick the response times can be there. Additionally, by searching for terms other than just looking for like on security IO things, by looking for certain names or words related to your organization anywhere within the domain, you can often find potential phishing domains that are targeting your organization or others in your supply chain. So for example, if you were looking for any subdomains that included like AWS or Amazon AWS or some permutations that weren't actually Amazon.com subdomains, you might be able to find potential like AWS phishes and add them to some kind of filter list. So having good situational awareness about the certificates that are being issued can prove very useful. The next demo we've got is just doing real-time port scanning of an asset as we open a port. So on the left, we've got a server, and we're going to open port 3389, which is the the port that RDP normally uses, which is remote access. On the right there, you can see that that's instantly been detected by our looping scan. Like Beth was saying, attackers can scan the entire web in 5 minutes, and they do so for things such as RDP, and look for things which have opened, and as soon as they have, they will start trying to exploit them. This, if you have bad RDP creds, that's a bad time for you. If they start just trying common usernames and passwords, it's one of the leading causes of breaches externally, is just people getting RDP brute force because someone accidentally left it open. And then other times it can be services that have been exposed accidentally, like admin interfaces running on different ports for web applications that don't need authentication and things like that. You really don't want to have exposed. I think that covers the two kind of demos we have. Yeah. Back to Beth, I think.
Cool, thanks, Carol. So yeah, that's obviously worth bringing us back now to kind of the beginning of what we were saying when we started, which is our kind of like key objectives of the presentation. So firstly, obviously, we introduced the concept of the compromise funnel and how the cybercrime industry actually works, the ecosystem. Then we obviously covered the simple mistakes that can cause a lot of hacks. So whether it's your mistake or a third party. And then obviously finally we just showed you some checks that can help you, some ways of understanding your exposure levels. But obviously we're aware that not everybody kind of has the time, maybe the resource or the technical experience to put these together or to understand, you know, what the results mean. So a lot of this is why we designed our tool Radar. So it's basically a kind of a threat intelligence tool which checks whether you're exposed to a lot of these common routes to compromise that we've kind of spoken about earlier on. It's basically designed to keep a bit of an eye for you. It'll notify you in the kind of one dashboard and allows you to be able to triage the issues most putting you at risk. It's actually included in a 2-week free trial that we have for both our vulnerability scanner and the Radar tool. You can sign up today on the website. There's a little QR code here if you want to scan that, or you can do that if you've already got a portal account. You can do that within the portal if you haven't yet tried it out. And that is pretty much it. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We hope you found the presentation useful. And then obviously we'd just like to hand it over to see if anyone's got any questions. Bear with me while I faff around with my Zoom box now. Do we have any questions at all? No. Oh, okay, so we've got one just come in which just said, how does... Oh, sorry, did we have a question?
Yes, it took me some time to unmute my microphone.
Sorry, I'm also having a Maya with Zoom as well.
So one message which is loud and clear, and I appreciate that, the whole idea of land and expand, where an attacker would like to use a compromised entry point and get into our systems. The question comes that, what would be your recommendation? So the mindset, we understand that land and expand, you get into through a phishing attack, through a malware into one endpoint, could be your laptop, my laptop, which I was sitting in Starbucks and so on. But then from that point onwards, what is there a recommended strategy or approach you would like to share with all your expertise an enterprise or a small business like ours should take to stop that, ability to enumerate the IP addresses and reach our either landing zones or endpoints or servers or other computers to stop that ransomware happening? I mean, is there something which you could share to help a small business like ours?
Yeah, so obviously it's quite like a complex question, and it massively depends on what your IT real estate looks like. Is it in cloud, is it on-prem, all that kind of stuff. However, I would say that generally the best way to look at it is to just presume that this is going to happen. So traditionally there was the idea of it being like a big walled castle where you make the outside of your network perimeter like hard as nails and hope that no one can get in like that. Whereas now it just tends to be better to assume that people are going to get in, because like you say, there can be phishing that can drop you right into the middle. People's devices can be compromised remotely. So just assuming that, thinking things through, like if this person's account was compromised, what could then happen from there, and trying to limit that as much as possible while still allowing them to do their jobs. So you're talking about having least privileges for the jobs they need to do, like people in finance shouldn't be able to access like other parts of the organization's file shares and things like that, just to keep it all closed down to prevent the spread of breaches, basically.
Yes, I mean, that is helpful. So I would say we're a fairly IT literate company. In fact, we are good at managing the internal side of things. But what bothers us is that because this is such a moving target, and the whole idea of attending this webinar was, okay, what we are doing, what we should do right, like making sure every user hybrid working, they have the right router set up, the right security set up, they are being monitored and things like that. So we are doing sort of things which are, I would say, best practices. But the worry, as far as I'm concerned, is how good or robust that is. I mean, we know perimeter defense doesn't work anymore because phishing attacks can breach through perimeter defense easily. So what else we should do? The problem is that now what else is so complex when you talk to organizations that try to sell you EDRs, XDRs, and all those solutions. And then you just wonder how much money should you spend and where there's a limit, it's like that. So I'm more keen to understand as a small business, even if you do the basics right, what else we could do to secure ourselves and our people and our systems. We are cloud, we all use Office 365. When we do have some on-prem setup, which is co-located, but I'm very keen to understand what else one should at least explore. I do have one security subscription, by the way, so I keep watching my public IPs and so on. But I'm just very. It's like I don't want to sleep every day thinking what else could go wrong. Just like that.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this might not be like the most satisfying answer. Yeah. But you were saying, you do the basics, and it's like, what else is there? A lot of the time, especially if you are small enough that you're just going to be caught by this like passive scanning type stuff, as opposed to being explicitly targeted hard, like Google or Facebook or whatever would be some big organization or a bank. A lot of the time, doing the basics and doing them right and consistently across your attack surface will be enough to prevent most bad stuff happening. There will still be times where the worst happens, where someone gets a phishing attack that's managed to get through and they've got access to your VPN or your cloud account and stuff. And at that point, it's about one, making sure it happens as soon as it has happened. So you're looking more at detection and observability then. And two, knowing exactly what you're going to do about it. And like I said before, trying to limit the impact of that. Yeah. But if you are doing all of the kind of the basics right, like keeping everything patched and up to date, keeping your external attack surface hardened, using more like managed platform as a service type stuff, where you don't have to worry about as much of that yourself, and using things like SSO to prevent people picking crap passwords and all that stuff, and to help with revoking access. Like, if you're doing all of that and you're doing it consistently, especially for a small organization, I think you will be in a pretty good spot. Yeah. Especially with hybrid cloud, like a lot of the tests we used to, with our hybrid working, a lot of the tests we used to do, or still do, for internal network tests, you'd find that the second you were like plugged into their internal network, it was incredibly easy to compromise the entire thing. But that's not the case now with such a decentralized working environment, where it's harder to pivot. Like, for example, if people are behind or in their own homes, they're behind layers of net, which prevents you accessing their workstations directly and things like that. So it's, in terms of lateral movement and stuff, the hybrid working has been somewhat beneficial, I would say.
Yes, yes. No, thank you. No, I understand. I mean, there's no straight approach to this. But
I would definitely say that just buying Darktrace is not the solution.
That's right. That's right. No. Yeah, I think the most important step we all can do, and I'm sort of sharing from experience, is just keep educating your people, keep educating your work about this.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Hi, sorry, I've got one too. I guess also just to chime in a little bit. We had I took over a role and we had a security issue, and part of it was the appetite risk for the company into what we put in place. So in our case, we've got insurance to protect against that. Obviously, the insurance will only cover X and that sort of thing, but we've also got MDR in place. And just like your RDP brute force, it actually protects us from one of those. Or it notified us. In fact, it didn't protect us in that case. It notified us. We could then took action within sort of 7 minutes to mitigate that threat, which is like the tools you're providing. My question was more about so you've obviously got the sort of automated tools that you can sign up with yourselves. Where do you think then pen testing fits into the picture, and manual pen testing?
So, I mean, if you look at the kind of stuff that these automated external tools are able to do, they're often the first line of like automated tools that testers would use when they sit down to do a test. So if you're doing like a 2-day test, maybe you're spending the first like 2 hours running these kind of tools, and then you're digging into everything much more deeply in a way that these tools can't do because they just don't understand the context and the information currently. Obviously, they're going to get better with AI and things like that in the future. However, yeah, it's only a small fraction of what testers do, but the benefit of it with this approach is that because this part's automated, you can do it every day or you can do it every week. You know, so you can be sure of like the low-hanging fruit. If you think about it like this, if attackers are only dedicating automated tools to your organization, then you'll be able to use automated tools to determine what issues they're looking for. If they're throwing actual human resources at it, then you need to do the same in order to know whether there's risks there that can be exploited.
There's a lot of talk about AI currently for security, but I don't know. I mean, for a small business like it's so confusing because your AI can be also the bad guy's AI too.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your view on this in terms of the subject of the webinar? I mean,
in regards to AI?
Yes. AI, cybersecurity, and ransomware was the subject of this webinar, right? Which is attackers' mind.
I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Obviously, the most advanced kind of AI we have at the moment in this regard is large language models like GPT, which can't inherently interact with the things that they need in order to exploit things or detect things out in the world. However, there's some promising or interesting things there. For example, you can give GPT some like binary code and say find a buffer overflow exploit in this, and it'll be like, yeah, cool, here you go. So I think not yet, but in a while, hooking into that kind of capability and feeding it data so that it's able to figure out get its own situational awareness of what's going on, and then asking it kind of questions from that to probe where to look next might work. There's one like GPT based, it's just like an experiment someone's done where you have it's like a pen tester could run it and they can feed tool output into it, and then they can ask it questions, and then it can advise them of potentially things to look at coming down. And that's obviously still basically just telling a human what to do, but the evolution of that would be interesting in the future. But like you say, it's going to go both ways, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens, I think.
Wait, do we have any more questions before we shoot off? No. Brilliant. Well, yeah, thanks very much everyone for joining us. Thanks to Callum for joining me and fielding some technical questions. But yeah, hope you all enjoyed the session. And as I said, we'll be following up with an email with the recording and some slides if you want to have a look at it again. But thanks very much all.
Thank you. Bye.